The camera opens on a dimly lit kitchen. James sits silently at the table, coffee in hand, while his son Tyler slams his phone down in frustration. Tyler, why do they treat me like I'm less than them? Why is it always on me to rise above? James looks away, the weight of his own unspoken pain evident. His voice is calm but heavy. James, you have to rise above it, son. You have to be better. But how can you rise above when the battle is never ending? Will Tyler ever escape the prejudices that still haunt his father? The tension lingers as the dinner table falls silent. Tyler, frustrated and still seething, stares out the window, barely noticing his father's gaze. James, sensing the growing divide, takes a deep breath. He knows this conversation must happen. It has to. He's been trying to teach Tyler about resilience, but today the lesson seems harder than ever. James, softly but firm. Tyler, listen to me. I know you're angry. I've been where you are. I've lived it. Watched people look at me and decide I wasn't enough because of the color of my skin. It doesn't matter how much I worked, how much I proved myself. They saw me, but they didn't see me. Tyler, looking away, voice shaking with frustration. I don't get it, Dad. You keep telling me to rise above, to be better than them. But when I do, they just find a way to knock me back down. At school, at work, everywhere. You say they don't see us, but when will that stop? James pauses, his voice heavy with memory. It never really stops, son. Not completely. But you have to keep going anyway. I know it's hard, but you have to hold your head up. It's a fight you can't give up on, not for you, not for me, not for anyone. Tyler, growing more agitated. Why? Why do we have to fight so hard just to be seen? Why can't they just see us? James's expression softens, but the ache in his heart deepens. He's never shared this much of his own pain with Tyler. As a father, it hurts to admit that some battles, no matter how hard you fight, never truly end. James, because the world doesn't always see us, son. But we have to keep showing them who we are, every single day. The camera lingers on Tyler's face, filled with confusion and anger, the burden of his father's words weighing heavily on him. The conversation is far from over, but it's clear that both father and son are facing a battle neither of them is fully prepared for. The evening continued to hang heavily over the family, and the quiet after their conversation seemed more oppressive than any noise. Tyler couldn't shake the anger that had been building inside him all day. He stared at his food, pushing it around his plate without eating. Every word James had spoken felt like a reminder that the world didn't care about his struggles. James, too, was lost in his thoughts. His attempt to guide his son had fallen flat, leaving him with a sense of helplessness. The weight of both his and Tyler's pain hung in the air like smoke that neither could escape. Tyler, finally breaking the silence, his voice shaking with frustration. I get it, Dad. You've had it tough. You've been dealing with this your whole life. But it's not the same anymore. Things have changed, but I'm still getting treated like I'm nothing. No matter how hard I try, they see me as just another black kid in the wrong place. And you still think that just working harder is going to make it better, but it doesn't. Tyler stood up, pushing his chair back so quickly that it scraped loudly against the floor. He paced across the room, his fists clenched, his whole body tense with raw emotion. Tyler, continuing, louder now, the frustration building. You tell me to rise above, but why should I have to? Why do I have to be better than them just to get a chance? You had to do it your whole life, and I don't want to live like that. I don't want to pretend everything's fine when it's not. It's like we're invisible to everyone but each other. They don't see us, and they never will, no matter how much we try. James sat still, his eyes following Tyler's movements. He could see the pain in his son's face, and it mirrored the same pain he'd carried for so many years. His heart ached for Tyler, but he knew the struggle was far from over. How could he explain to his son the weight of a lifetime spent fighting for dignity in a world that seemed determined to strip it away? James, his voice low but firm. You don't understand. You're right. I've spent my life working harder than anyone else just to be seen as equal. And it's not fair. It's not fair to you, to your sister, to anyone. But you can't let the world's hatred become your own. We can't let it control us. Yes, the world sees us through a different lens, but that doesn't mean we have to live by it. We have to rise above, even when it feels impossible. Tyler stopped pacing and turned to face his father, a scowl on his face. His eyes were bright with anger, but there was something deeper there too, fear. Fear of never being enough. Fear of being stuck in a cycle of injustice that he didn't know how to break out of. And worse, the fear that his father, the person who had always been his rock, didn't understand that fear. Tyler, voice trembling, his frustration now mixed with confusion. Why can't you just see what's right in front of you? You say we have to rise above, but how? Every time I get passed over, every time I get ignored, it feels like I'm invisible. I'm working just as hard as anyone else, but no matter what, it's never enough. How do you live like that, Dad? James stood up now, the weight of his son's words sinking in. He walked slowly towards Tyler, his expression softer but still firm, knowing that this conversation was more than just about the anger they were both feeling. It was about understanding, about being heard. James, placing a hand on Tyler's shoulder, speaking with a tenderness that had been missing from their earlier exchange. I can't promise it's going to be easy, son. I can't promise that the world will change just because we want it to. But what I can promise is that we will face this together. I've been where you are. I've walked down that road of rejection and pain. But I've also learned that we can't let those moments define us. We can't let other people's hatred become a weight we carry forever. I've seen it all, Tyler. And what I've learned is that we fight not just for ourselves, but for each other. We stand tall not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward. Tyler, standing in front of his father, felt a rush of conflicting emotions, anger, confusion, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope. He wasn't sure if he could do it, if he could ever rise above the weight of the world's prejudice. But for the first time in a long while, he wasn't alone. His father, despite everything, was still standing by his side. Tyler, softly, almost to himself. I don't know if I'm strong enough, Dad. James looked at his son, his heart aching with both pride and sorrow. He wanted so much to say the right words, to take away the pain, but he knew the journey would be long. It would take more than just words. It would take time, perseverance, and love. James, with a determined, yet comforting tone. You're stronger than you think, son. We all are. The room fell silent once more, but this time, the silence was different. It wasn't filled with anger or frustration. It was the quiet before something new, something stronger, began to take root between them. The next few days were no easier. The tension in the house only grew as Tyler continued to grapple with the weight of rejection and discrimination. It was a Saturday afternoon when Tyler walked into the kitchen, holding a crumpled letter in his hand. His face was tight, the edges of his mouth drawn into a frown. James, who had been sitting at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, looked up, sensing the familiar cloud of frustration hanging over his son. Tyler, voice thick with anger. They rejected me again, Dad. The same old story. You're a strong candidate, but they didn't say it. I know what they meant. It's because of the color of my skin. James felt the old sting of that familiar truth in his chest. He'd faced it too, time and time again, but seeing his son carry the same burden hurt more than he could have imagined. He placed the newspaper down slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. James softly. Tyler, I know it hurts, but you can't let it get to you. You can't let them win. Tyler slammed the letter onto the table, his frustration turning into a flare of anger. Tyler, louder now, his voice rising with emotion. I've been doing everything right. I worked so hard to get those grades, to stand out, and it's still not enough. You don't get it, Dad. No matter how much I try, it's like the world's just waiting for me to fail. Why should I keep trying if they're going to reject me just because of how I look? James watched his son with a mixture of sorrow and helplessness. The same pain he had carried for years was now clearly in his son's eyes. He had hoped Tyler's generation wouldn't face these struggles, but here they were, caught in the same cycle of injustice. James, calm but heavy with experience. You have to keep pushing, Tyler. It's not fair, but you can't let it break you. You rise above them, no matter what. That's the only way to fight back. Tyler, shaking his head, disbelieving. Rising above them doesn't work, Dad. It hasn't worked for you, and it won't work for me. They still see us as less than them. They always will. Before James could respond, the sound of small footsteps interrupted. Avery, his young daughter, came running into the kitchen, a notebook filled with colorful drawings in her hands. She stopped short when she noticed the tension in the room. Avery, looking between them, confused. Why are you both so upset? You're not fighting, are you? Tyler let out a heavy sigh and turned away, trying to hide the frustration and hurt in his eyes. He wasn't ready to explain this to his little sister. He was still trying to understand it himself. The silence hung between father and son, thick with unspoken words. Tyler, quietly, almost to himself. I just don't get it. James stood there, watching his son, feeling the deep weight of everything Tyler was carrying. He wanted to shield him from the pain, from the rejection, but the truth was he couldn't protect him from the world. He had tried for so long to shield his own heart from that truth, but he couldn't anymore. Tyler was learning the same lessons the hard way, just as James had. A few days passed, and the strain between father and son only deepened. Tyler came home from school that Friday afternoon, his eyes distant, his body slumped as he walked through the door. James noticed the change immediately. There was something different in the way his son was holding himself, something more defeated. James, gently sensing the shift. "What happened, Tyler?" "Tyler," his voice low and heavy with emotion. "They called me the N-word again today. And the worst part, the teacher saw it. She heard it, but she didn't do anything. She didn't even look at me." The room seemed to grow colder, as if the weight of Tyler's words had sucked the warmth from the air. James's heart sank, the pain of his son's experience cutting deeper than any of his own past struggles had ever felt. The helplessness he had tried so hard to hide now came flooding back. The world had rejected him, and now it was doing the same to his son. James, his voice thick with emotion, trying to stay composed. "I'm so sorry, Tyler. I wish I could take this pain away from you. But I know I can't. I know how it feels. And I'm angry too. Angry that this is the world we have to live in." Tyler, tears welling up in his eyes, his voice breaking. "Then what do we do, Dad? How do we keep going when nothing changes? How do I keep going when they won't even let me be who I am?" James stood still, his hand hovering between reaching out to comfort his son and acknowledging the deep, unspoken reality they both shared. In that moment, there were no easy answers. Just the painful truth that the fight against racism was a battle that neither of them would ever truly escape. The night stretched on, and James found himself sitting alone in the dimly lit living room, the silence louder than any argument. The weight of the day's events pressed down on him, each word spoken by Tyler like an echo of the battles James had fought and lost in his own life. His eyes traced the worn edges of the photo album on the table before him, the black and white pictures of his own childhood, a young boy surrounded by a world that refused to see him as equal. He had always believed that his struggles, his pain, would be enough to keep his children from facing the same obstacles. But now, as he sat there, staring at the reality of Tyler's frustration, the truth hit him hard. James, whispering to himself, his voice hoarse. "Why couldn't I protect him from this? I should have done more, said more." His voice trailed off, the thought of his own failures flooding him. He had spent years trying to teach Tyler about resilience, but it was clear now, he hadn't prepared him for the emotional toll, the overwhelming exhaustion of constantly fighting. He hadn't taught him how to handle the weight of being judged before even opening his mouth, the constant feeling of being less than in a world that made no effort to understand. James looked out the window, the streetlights casting a faint glow through the blinds. The world outside was still, but inside, everything felt like it was falling apart. He thought back to the countless times he had been told he wasn't good enough. The time he applied for jobs, only to be turned away without explanation, or the years he spent watching his own family face discrimination that he couldn't shield them from. He remembered the hurt of being passed over for promotions, the dismissive looks from strangers in stores, and the subtle but cutting remarks that followed him from city to city, job to job. The bitterness had always been there, but it had never been more present than it was now, as he watched his son go through the same struggle. As the memories weighed on him, James closed his eyes, the pain of it all almost too much to bear. He reached out for the photo album, his fingers brushing the images of his own father, his own mother. They too had fought battles. They had struggled for their dignity, just as he was now doing for his son. And yet, despite everything they had endured, the world still saw them for their skin color, not their character. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Tyler, his voice shaky but determined. Tyler, standing in the doorway, unsure but needing to speak. "Dad, can we talk?" James didn't hesitate. He stood up and motioned for Tyler to come in, his heart aching for the son he hadn't fully understood until now. James, sitting down across from Tyler. "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" Tyler, hesitating, his voice quiet. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just don't know how to handle it anymore. Everything feels like it's stacked against me. I don't want to disappoint you." Tyler's words hung in the air, thick with guilt and confusion. James could see the toll it was taking on him, the strain in his eyes. For the first time, James saw his son as he had once been, a young man caught in a system that had no intention of letting him win. And it broke him. "James," his voice heavy with emotion. "Tyler, you're not disappointing me. I've been so focused on teaching you how to fight the world that I forgot to teach you how to handle the pain. I've spent my life pretending that I could escape it, but I can't. And I've done the same to you. You're right, you shouldn't have to fight every day like I did. But son, I never showed you how much it hurts. I never showed you how to deal with it. Tyler sat there, staring at his father. The words were painful to hear, but they were exactly what he needed. He had always thought that his father had it all figured out, that he had the answers. But hearing James admit his own vulnerability broke down the last wall Tyler had built between them. Tyler, softly after a pause. Dad, I don't know how to keep going. It just feels like I'm running in circles, like I'll never escape. James reached out and placed a hand on Tyler's, the weight of his own experience blending with his son's pain. James, sighing deeply. You will. You'll find a way. But the way forward isn't always through anger, son. Sometimes it's through understanding. Sometimes it's just knowing that no matter how hard it gets, you keep going. You don't have to do it alone. Tyler nodded, the tightness in his chest easing just a little. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe. Maybe the fight wasn't just about rising above. It was about acknowledging the weight of the struggle and standing together in it. Together, they could face anything. The days that followed were quieter, but the weight of the conversation between James and Tyler hung in the air like a cloud neither of them could shake off. Tyler, still troubled by his experiences, had become withdrawn, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. Meanwhile, James found himself reflecting on his own upbringing, the lessons he had learned over the years, and the undeniable truth that no matter how much he tried to protect Tyler, he couldn't shield him from the harshness of the world. One evening, as the sky outside darkened, James found himself at work later than usual. He had been staying late at the office, trying to avoid the tension that was beginning to build back home. His colleague Bill, a man he had known for years, entered the office with a familiar smile. Bill was always quick to joke, always upbeat, but tonight, there was something different in his eyes. Bill, sitting down across from James, his voice unusually serious. Hey James, you got a minute? I need to talk to you about something. James, taken aback by Bill's change in demeanor, set his pen down and nodded. James, of course. What's on your mind? Bill, leaning forward, lowering his voice. I don't know if you've heard, but there's been some talk going around the office. Some of the higher-ups are starting to wonder if you're a good fit for the promotion they've been considering you for. Not that your work hasn't been great, but, well, let's just say there are concerns. James's chest tightened as he absorbed Bill's words. The familiar sting of discrimination reared its ugly head once again, and for a moment, the years of struggle seemed to collapse on him. James, clenching his fists, his voice barely above a whisper. Concerns? You mean because I'm black? Bill shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding James's gaze. His silence was all the confirmation James needed. Bill, James, I'm not the one spreading these rumors, but I thought you should know. For a few moments, the room was silent. James's heart raced, his mind swirling with years of frustration and anger. The same forces that had once tried to tear him down were still at work, even now, in this place that he had fought so hard to succeed in. James, finally speaking, his voice shaky but resolute. I've spent my whole life trying to prove my worth. Every day, every step, I've had to work harder than anyone else just to be seen as equal. And now, after everything, they're still doubting me because of the color of my skin. Bill's eyes softened with sympathy, but there was nothing he could say to make the sting go away. Bill, I'm sorry, James. I really am. But you've always been a fighter. You'll find a way through this, I know it. James, exhausted by the years of trying to push back, let out a slow breath. He hadn't realized until now how much this fight had worn him down. It wasn't just the external battles, it was the emotional toll of always having to prove himself. For the first time, the thought of just letting go crossed his mind. But then something in him stirred. A memory. The memory of his own father, who had faced even worse struggles, but had never given up. James felt a spark of resolve flicker within him. Later that evening, as James walked back home, the cool air of the night felt sharper than usual. He hadn't realized how long he'd been walking, lost in his own thoughts. When he stepped inside, Tyler was sitting at the kitchen table, his schoolwork scattered in front of him. The usual frustration was still present in his eyes, but something had shifted. His posture was less tense, more open than it had been the past few days. James, sitting down across from him, his tone gentle. Tyler, I need to apologize for not being completely honest with you about my own struggles. I've spent so much time trying to shield you from the hurt, I didn't realize how much it was affecting you. You're right. You're fighting a battle that I didn't prepare you for. And it hurts me that I can't fix it. Tyler, looking up at his father, saw the vulnerability in his eyes, something he had never seen before. The anger he had been holding onto began to fade, replaced by a deep sadness and understanding. Tyler, softly, his voice full of emotion. "You don't have to protect me from it, Dad. I just don't want to feel like I'm fighting it alone. It's not just you. I see how the world looks at us. I see it at school, at work. But I want to be strong. I want to keep going." James reached across the table, placing his hand on Tyler's. There was still so much left unsaid, so much pain that had yet to heal. But for the first time, they both understood that healing didn't mean ignoring the struggle. It meant acknowledging it together. James, his voice quiet but firm. "You're not alone, son. We face this together. And together, we'll find a way forward." The weight of the past still hung in the air, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Hope that their shared strength would carry them forward, even if the world outside continued to challenge them. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a soft golden light across the living room. James sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched coffee cup in front of him. The house was still, quieter than usual. His mind kept returning to the conversation he'd had with Tyler the night before. After years of trying to shield him from the worst of the world's prejudice, James realized that the truth, his truth, was far more important than any lessons he had tried to impart. Tyler needed to know that his pain was real, and that it was okay to acknowledge it, not bury it. He wasn't alone. The sound of footsteps approaching interrupted his thoughts. It was Tyler, still in his pajamas, but there was something different about him this morning. His posture was less rigid, and there was no anger in his eyes, only quiet reflection. He had been carrying this weight for so long, but now it seemed he was ready to confront it. Tyler, softly walking to the table. "Dad, can we talk?" James looked up, his heart sinking and rising at the same time. He could see the uncertainty in his son's face, the vulnerability he hadn't seen before. It reminded him of himself when he was Tyler's age, lost, unsure, but wanting to believe in something better. James, nodding slowly. "Of course, son. I'm here." Tyler, sitting down, his voice a little shaky. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not letting the world change who we are. I think I've been trying to do it all on my own, like I'm supposed to just fight through it, keep going without letting it show. But I don't want to be angry anymore, Dad. I don't want to carry that hate around." James's chest tightened as he listened. It was clear that Tyler had been holding back, thinking that his pain made him weak, that confronting it was a sign of failure. But now Tyler was finally admitting it. He needed to face it, not avoid it. James, gently, with a warm smile. "You don't have to do this alone, Tyler. That's the whole point. We've always been in this together. The world may see us one way, but here at home, we see each other for who we truly are. Strong, even when it's hard." Tyler met his father's eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. The weight of the last few months seemed to lift just a little, but the road ahead was still long. But for the first time in a while, he felt a sense of peace, a sense that he wasn't alone in the fight. "Tyler," his voice soft, yet determined. "I don't want to be angry anymore, Dad. I want to be strong like you. I don't want to carry this hatred inside me. But I also want to be able to feel it, not hide it. You know." James nodded, understanding. He had spent his life hiding his anger, burying his pain, but now he saw that it was in sharing that hurt that they could finally begin to heal. It was in acknowledging their struggles together that they could rise above them. James, his voice filled with warmth. "That's the first step, son. You're not alone in this. We're family. We carry each other's burdens. And if we have to fight, we fight together." The two sat there for a moment in silence, the tension between them melting away. It wasn't that the struggle was over, far from it. But now they had each other. And for the first time in a long time, Tyler felt like he had the strength to move forward, not just on his own, but with his father by his side. Avery, barging in, her innocence cutting through the moment, with a big smile on her face. "You guys talking about stuff? Can I join?" Both James and Tyler chuckled, the weight of their conversation lightened by Avery's presence. Her curiosity, her openness, was a reminder of the future they were fighting for. Tyler ruffled her hair, finally smiling himself. Tyler, teasing her. "Sure, kiddo. You're always welcome." The three of them sat down together at the table, sharing breakfast, the weight of the world outside momentarily forgotten. They weren't blind to the struggles ahead, but for the first time, there was a quiet, steadfast hope. Together, they were stronger than any force that tried to tear them apart. James, looking between Tyler and Avery, his heart full. We've got this together. We'll face it all, side by side. No matter what the world says, we know the truth. Tyler nodded, his shoulders a little lighter now, his heart a little stronger. He had his family, and that was enough. No matter what the world threw at them, they would stand together as one. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change the world, one step at a time. As the evening sun dipped low, casting a warm, golden hue over the neighborhood, James sat on the porch, a glass of iced tea resting in his hands. The world outside felt calm, quieter than the storm that had raged inside their home just days ago. But the weight of the conversations with Tyler and the moments of painful realization still lingered. His heart was heavy with both sorrow and hope, the recognition that they could no longer fight in silence, but needed to face the world together. Tyler walked out onto the porch, a faint smile on his face, his posture lighter than it had been in weeks. He joined his father without a word, sitting next to him and gazing out at the setting sun. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It felt like the calm after a storm, necessary, peaceful. James, glancing at Tyler, breaking the silence. "You've changed, son. You're not holding that anger inside anymore. I can see it. I can feel it." Tyler, nodding, his voice quiet but sure. "I think I finally get it, Dad. I can still be angry, but I don't have to carry it all the time. I can stand up for myself, but I don't need to let the world make me into something I'm not." James looked at his son, a deep pride swelling within him. He saw a young man who was beginning to understand what it truly meant to fight, not just with fists or words, but with understanding, grace, and resilience. Tyler had started to let go of the anger that had been consuming him, learning that it wasn't about erasing the pain, but about growing stronger through it. James, speaking softly, reflecting, "You're right, Tyler. It's not about letting the world define us. It's about defining who we are for ourselves. It's about doing what's right, even when it feels impossible." Tyler leaned back in his chair, his eyes focused on the horizon. For the first time, he felt like he was seeing things clearly, not just the world, but himself. He understood now that he could rise above the prejudices of others, not by erasing his identity, but by embracing it fully. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone in that fight. He had his family beside him, and that gave him a new kind of strength. Tyler, looking at his father with newfound resolve. "I won't let them win, Dad. Not anymore. I'm going to keep fighting, but now, I know I don't have to fight alone." James smiled, the weight on his chest easing slightly. He had always hoped that one day, Tyler would see this truth for himself. That day had finally come. James had fought his own battles, and he would continue to, but now he knew that the real victory was not in winning the fight, but in sharing it with those he loved. The sound of Avery's laughter filled the air as she came running out onto the porch, followed closely by her mother. Maria, James's wife, smiled warmly at them as she joined the family. She had watched the tension between father and son ease over the past few days, and she could see the healing beginning. Maria, with a gentle smile, sitting down beside them. "I'm glad you two are talking more. It's been hard on all of us, but I see the change. I see it in both of you." James, nodding, his voice filled with gratitude. "We've still got a long way to go, Maria. But today, it feels like we've made a real step. Together." The family sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the evening breeze rustling the trees and the birds singing in the distance. They were no longer trapped in their individual battles. For the first time, they were truly united, facing the world and whatever challenges it might throw their way as a family. Tyler, smiling softly, with a sense of peace. "I'm ready, Dad. Whatever comes next, I'm ready." James looked at his son, the tears that had once threatened to fall now replaced by a sense of hope. The journey was far from over, but together they could face anything. They had each other, and that, in itself, was the greatest strength they could ever need. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, the family felt a new sense of purpose. The darkness of the world still loomed outside their door, but inside there was light. There was love. There was hope. James, to himself, softly, "We've made it this far, and together we'll keep going." The power of family and resilience. The story of James and Tyler teaches us a profound lesson about the importance of resilience, the struggle for dignity, and the strength that comes from facing life's challenges together. In the midst of racial prejudice and systemic injustice, both father and son navigated the painful reality of being judged before they could even speak. James tried to protect his son, teaching him to rise above it all, but he failed to prepare Tyler for the emotional weight of discrimination, the constant burden of being seen as less than. However, the turning point comes when James admits his own vulnerabilities to Tyler, realizing that strength isn't just about standing tall in the face of adversity. It's also about sharing the pain, acknowledging the struggle, and offering support to those you love. Tyler, after confronting his own anger and frustration, learns that he doesn't have to fight this battle alone. His father's honesty and vulnerability spark a new sense of understanding between them. The true lesson is clear. In times of hardship, it's not about enduring the pain in silence. It's about confronting it head-on, with those who care for you, and finding strength in each other. No matter how heavy the weight of racism or life's struggles may be, the power of family and unity can lift you higher than any individual fight. As James and Tyler come to realize, the world may be unjust, but the love and support within their family form the foundation that will carry them forward. The fight for justice is long, but together, they know they are stronger than the forces trying to tear them apart. This story highlights the generational struggles of overcoming racial prejudice and the importance of family support. How do you think we can break the cycle of discrimination, not just through personal resilience, but by leaning on those around us? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a moment where family support made a difference in facing societal challenges? Share your thoughts, experiences, and let's discuss how we can all contribute to creating a more understanding and inclusive world. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video if you believe in the power of unity and empathy.